In our last video, I looked at doing logging inside of Java, but I said it's not specific to Java. It's found in a lot of different languages. So I want to show you how it's done in Python real quick. Now it's the same idea. It's the ability to write message files inside of a log file, or maybe to a screen as well. But the idea being that it's something we can capture and we can use later on. And that's what's so important. So here I have a very simple FizzBuzz type program, just like I did before inside of Java, except now it's written in Python. I do import a logging module. So similar to how I had to import logging for Java, I have to import it inside of Python, and everything's basically set up for me there. With logging, I have a basic config, and I can set this up. I can say, hey, you know what? I want to use this file. I want to set this format, and we're going to see what it looks like in just a second. And then how do I want the file mode? So I can do a write, I can do a append, just like I would if I was opening and closing a file normally in Python. Now, a very common thing that I'm going to do inside of a lot of these logging applications is I will set the date as well. So I'll have like log underscore and then today's date. And that way, every new day, I get a new log file. And what that does is it makes it so if I say, hey, I'm only having these problems on Tuesdays, or I have this problem on the end of the week or the end of the month or whatever like that, I don't have to go through gigabytes of logs to find it. I'm making my log files manageable to work with and easier to upload back to myself if I'm giving it, like, for example, to a client. So here I've got this set up. And like I said, typically the file name would be a little bit different, but for this application, it works. Then whenever I want to, I can say logging dot. In this case, here's how we have an error. Now, typically an error would, of course, be inside of something like a try except inside of Python. Here inside Buzz, I have logging.info. And I actually have a wide variety of different things I can do, including warnings and other things I'm going to show you in just a minute. But when I go and run this, you're going to notice that in this case, there is no messages appearing inside my console. That's because I've defined it all inside the file name. So if I go to fizzbuzz.log, you can see here, this is the date time, which is, remember, the very first thing that I said. And then it specifies if it's an error, etc. And then it shows in fizz. Now you might be going, wait a second, where's that other? Didn't you have like an info where it shows the buzz? Well, by default, it's not going to show those infos. It's only showing the errors. Okay. I would have to go in and say, hey, you know what? I want to show more information. This allows me to go in and say, how much information do I want? Do I want just a little bit of information? Do I want a lot of information, etc.? Okay. So let's take a look at that real quick. So here's a logging example I have. And this just kind of shows you how to do a little bit of everything. I have import logging. I have a logger config once again. And you'll notice that here I have set level logging debug. Okay. So this is going to go new file.log and it's going to set debug. I have debug, info, warning, error, and even critical. So if I go and I run this, notice that nothing really happens, but I'm going to come here and new file.log and I get message, information, warning, try to divide by 0, internet is down. If I look at this, I can see that, hey, debug, harmless debug info, just information. Okay, it's all there, right? Let me show you one other though, just to kind of show you what you can do. I'm going to come over here and say, you know what? I only want warn. Now if I go and run this, notice that not all of them are showing. Warning showing, error showing, and critical showing. So what have I done? I've changed what's going to show in my error message. I'm only getting the most. Of course, putting that inside of a file is going to be a little bit tough because maybe someone doesn't want to use that. Maybe they're like, oh, you know what? I don't know how to go in and edit my source code. Or maybe you don't trust them. Or maybe it's compiled, because you can compile Python into an executable, although most people don't. So what do you do? Well, I'm going to come over here, logger example. And notice here I have a config file. I can actually load in my configuration from a config file. So notice that this is all basically the same. It's a little bit simpler messages, right? But it's basically the same. Let me come here to my temp.config file. And sure enough, I have where to set my loggers, my handlers, a little bit more information. I have to go in and test things out. This is actually going to run things to both the console as well as to a file, which is kind of interesting. And I can set different pieces of information to go to the console than to the file. So what this does is just makes it easier for me to be able to configure it. It's external for my source code. I can say, hey, you know what? Just copy this file in. And I go from, only displaying critical information to maybe displaying everything. And it's because a real easy way for someone with minimal technical skills, like a client or a server admin, who probably has more skills but still doesn't want to deal with source code, to be able to go in, give you a configuration file that you can then configure to use. Let me show you real quick here. And I'm going to do the console handler. I'm going to set this to error. Clear out my console window down here. So now I'm going to go in and run this. Notice I only get error and critical. And then if I had a log file, which I don't right now for this, I'd have to set that up in my configuration. But if I have a log file, I could display a different amount of data. So the user sees a little bit, I see a lot, or vice versa, depending upon what I need. So it's kind of an interesting set that I can work with. Hopefully that's interesting for you. It's just another way of helping you debug. You can see if you watch the video in Java, you can see how it's similar but also slightly different. So real important with that, how a lot of different programming languages provide the same types of ideas, just how they implement them is going to be a little bit different. Look out for our next videos that's coming up here.